This will be fine. How does that look, guys?
Visible.
So far, so good. Oh,
All right. Looks like I've got 5 after. We'll go ahead and get started, guys. I have a belief that if you are in this room, you are by definition a Ferrari. The question is, are you at top speed in the 5th gear? Are you like really getting all you can, or getting close to it? Or are you got the clutch in, you're shifting up the 3rd to 4th, really getting some nice momentum, shifting smoothly? Or like me, have you experienced the frustration of redlining in 2nd with the tachometer going into 9,000 or even blowing the engine? Been there and done that. That's why we're talking about 10x is easier than 2x today, and what are the key questions to shift your mindset? So today we're going to delve into that and take a look at how we can change our mindset to start thinking more 10x. And what I'd like you guys to do, just for a brief moment, think about what does it like to have happen today, and you can put it in the chat, or if anybody has or any desire to share with me what they would like to have happen, I'm absolutely open to any questions about that. All right, looks like we're ready to roll on to the next one here.
these samples are always great. That's hilarious. Yeah, I would say, Doug, I think for so many of us, as interest rates begin to climb, banks are harder to get loans from. We're watching our friends be more stressed out in the real estate investing space, that being able to start really getting clear about what we want, what our future looks like, and then also having this sense of community to be held accountable and support each other. I think that is a huge part of what I would like to get out of today.
That is really awesome, Christina. Very well said. I couldn't have said it better myself. And I think we're going to have some tools today as we leave to think about that. All right. Well, we're going to go ahead and move on to the inspiration. And Christina and I have talked about this book, and the author, Benjamin Hardy and Dan Sullivan, have been generating some of the best content lately that I've seen from everyone. And I know you guys have had the sensation. You read a bunch of books and they start to converge, right? They're all, okay, that's just one more somebody saying something in the same thing in a different way. Me personally, I find that Benjamin Hardy and Dan Sullivan are saying some fresh things, and that's what inspired today's session. And so I wanted to kind of share with you why I think you should read the book, and also some extensions that they don't really talk about, and some new models to think about. So our objectives today, I'm going to introduce 10x is easier than 2x from a broad standpoint. Also going to do a crash course on the theory of constraints. And then finally, we're going to talk a little bit about the logical levels and just diagnose the 2x thinking you may be experiencing. My promise today is to give you tools to audit your 10x mindset. And so the overarching question for today, guys, is what is a filter? And this is the definition, a definition of a filter for sure, is pass a liquid, gas, light, sound, dare I say thought, through a device to remove unwanted material. And then the narrator, one, it gets blocked, two, sometimes doesn't it? So just wanted to set that as the back overarching frame to think about what is a filter. Before we give you some good news, I'm going to pour a little cold water on a cold day, ice cold water on a winter day here. So first, some observation, and I didn't change the slide. All progress begins with telling the truth. Dan Sullivan quoting the AA. And then we have met the enemy, and he is us. That's also the opportunity, though, right, guys? But first, we have to acknowledge that. Another quote that really is a bedrock to everything we're doing: until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. And that's Carl Jung giving us some advice to really think about there. Okay, now the great news. And essentially, we are what we do. Excellent is therefore not an act, a habit. So essentially, what this is saying to us is, no, it doesn't matter who said it, even if it wasn't Aristotle. And that was the funny thing about preparing for this, is like, Aristotle didn't actually say that. So I'm going to just say, okay, cool. It doesn't matter who actually said it, but isn't it useful to model talented people in the best mindsets and the best folks that have what you want? And so today I'd like to introduce three geniuses. Our expert witnesses for the trial, ladies and gentlemen, will be Wilfredo Pareto, Eli Goldratt, and then Robert Dilts here. And so first and foremost, this is the bedrock of the 10x principle is easier than 2x. It's the Pareto principle. Basically, it's the 80-20 rule, and I'm sure you've heard it mentioned, but it's basically the core concept is that very, very little of our effort drives most of our results. So what the 10x is easier than 2x philosophy is saying is look very closely at what you're doing and kind of contemplate, well, how do I shift from 2x to 10x? And this was a number one filter. And remember how I mentioned we're going to use filter as our overarching word for the day. The first filter that really can help us really dial in is what are we focusing in on? And this is a model that Dr. Hardy presented that said, if you have the 2x mindset, you're letting 80% of your existing stuff drive what you're doing, and you're only letting in the 20% new. And then in order to 10x, you basically have to get rid of most of what you're doing currently. And therein lies the number one opportunity and challenge is that that comfort zone. You remember the slide at the beginning about the comfort zone is in order to 10x, you have to get uncomfortable by definition, I think. And that is the number one observation that I have about this particular slide is this just confirms back that saying, or we talk about a lot, in order to go to the next level or to do something you haven't done, you have to, by definition, get uncomfortable. All right, and why choose the 10x goal versus a 2x? First and foremost, 2x goals are only incremental. Even if you are continuing to do what you wanted to do, or you're continuing down the line and you're ho-humming, you're doing okay. But your 2x goals are incremental. You're not going to really change the outcome very much. And then the flip side is with 10x goals, it requires intense focus. And what I think the big takeaway is there are very few ways to do that. So they cause you to focus in a different way and really focus on the one or two things that would make that big of a difference for you. Another thing, 2x goals are much more competitive. Think about raising for a $2 million raise versus a $100 million, $100 million deal, right? Or a $5 million deal where you're raising, 2 or 3 million. There is a school of thought out there that basically says the $100 million deal is actually easier to raise for, and that's a challenging thought, but it is likely true. Heaven forbid we use a 2x goal also, right? If we have a 2x goal and we reach it, with the same amount of time, if we had a 10x goal and got 7x, consider that. What if you meet your goals and you could have 10x'd and you ended up at 7x instead versus 2x? And so that's another big philosophy from the book, or something to think about that I thought was really, really useful. All right, guys, now shifting into the theory of constraints and talking about how we can use system constraints as a filter that will help us. Consider this simple unit here. This is a system that outputs 90 units per hour. What theory of constraints allows us to do is look at our system, and it permits us back to filter number one, focus. Right here, we can see clearly that the station one is not the constraint, is it? Because it can do 150 an hour. Station three obviously isn't, because it's 175, but it's pretty clear that the station two that only does 100 units per hour is our system constraint. That's the max we're going to be able to do from the system. And so in order to change this outcome and 10x, if you will, you have to 10x the station two there, or at a very minimum, you have to increase it above the 150 at least to see a big change in the output. And I don't know about you guys, but I've made this blunder, and this is the most human thing to do ever. We have a system, and we take a look at it. We're just kind of randomly doing things, and well, I'm going to increase station one instead. So I increase station one to 250 units per hour. But did that change my output? Almost certainly not, right? Because it didn't fix station two's constraint. Therefore, and again, this is not a criticism, this is an observation. I've definitely done this to myself. Working on the non-constraint, not mentioning anything but quantitative finance is a prime example in my case. Spending time on things that don't drive the system. All right, now consider this change. Let's change station two to 200 units an hour. The constraint changed, didn't it? So notice that now station two is no longer the system optimum. Station one has now become the output. And so essentially what theory of constraints does for us, folks, is allows us to consider the system as a whole and gives us a filter, if you will. And these are the rules of TOC Club. These are the 5 focusing steps. So to identify this, we first identify this constraint. We say, okay, well, it looks like station two really needs to change there, so that we can really look at that and focus on that. We're going to focus all of our efforts on station two. Exploit the constraint. That means, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to go in and we're going to find out how to fix it and what we need to do that. And subordinate everything else. It means you're going to get in there and make that your focus, and really just focus on that one problem. And it's back to the one thing philosophy also. That is our number one thing we need to focus on, fixing that constraint until that's no longer the problem. And then elevate the constraint, meaning that's where we actually implement the change. And then the final step is prevent inertia. So basically don't let it backslide, essentially. Okay, and the overarching goal, and Dr. Goldratt gave us this philosophy, if you will. Throughput is the number one consideration. So when you're thinking about, well, what's the number one thing I should think about? It's units per hour, or units of output per unit of time, essentially. So if that's your number one consideration in anything you're doing from a system standpoint. Okay, now that we know what to do, and let's investigate why you might not, and talk a little bit about the mindset piece now and shift into that. This is another book in the Dr. Ben Hardy library that is really revolutionary thing, and it really boils down to, imagine in order to get your future self, you have to start acting out of that future self and let that drive your behavior. And so to that end, I'd like to introduce the adult's logical levels of learning and change. And so essentially, this is a diagnostic tool that we may use for ourselves or even for organizations. And that's one of the nice things about this tool that you can use as a diagnostic. You can look either as an organization from an organizational standpoint, or any kind of system, or for ourselves for sure. It did mainly arrive in the coaching space for individuals, but it also has application to organizations as well. the main observations to know about the logical levels is that the upper level can be affected by the lower level for sure. I'm sure you've had that case where environment changes your behavior a little bit. You know, what you're surrounded by, who you're surrounded by, that can change your behavior. But the flip side is to always note is that if we change at the values and levels level, it will change everything else. There's no way around that. So that encourages us up to go up to higher levels and to make more significant changes and make sure we want to track the changes we need. We have to go up the logical levels to the identity. And so the core thesis, if you don't take anything else away from my presentation today, note that your identity level is driving almost driving the bus entirely. For the most part, it starts with your identity level beliefs and then your sub level of motivation in your why. And so you took your values and beliefs and your filters. And I'm also including filters on this level, guys, for the record. So our filters of how we're perceiving everything at this level in our identity through is basically a part of that filter as well. So this is another filter that we can consider on how things are going. And so how they line up essentially, and consider this person, goes to the bar every night, hangs out with his friends, plays Xbox, has no purpose, has some identity, has some values, but capabilities and behaviors are down here. But the environment is essentially their dominant factor here. This is the thing driving them most. Is their environment is really most impactful in their world. And then consider this as a complement to each other. Do you remember the system constraint theory? What if we thought about the logical levels as a constraint? So if you have an identity that will not let you 10x, then how can you ever 10x successfully, right? So if my identity level is I'm not the kind of person that can 10x for whatever reason, and it can be back to that subconscious or conscious level, and usually a lot of this stuff, guys, I'm going to speculate, a lot of it is in that subconscious area, and this is where the benefit of hypnosis and coaching really makes a big difference. I did get some coaching earlier this year, and changing the subsurface and making it conscious really makes the huge difference. So what is the constraint in your world right now? And so food for thought, what is it? Is it that the purpose you have currently is undefined or not clear? Is your identity not supporting your purpose? And same thing with beliefs and filters. Are the beliefs and filters in conflict with your identity? So when you get stuck or you're in a stuck state where things aren't progressing, these are things to look at and say, well, where is the problem at? And what is the constraint of what I'm currently facing? And so let's revisit somebody else. This is somebody else who's like, okay, well, I'm a syndicator and I'm doing really well. I've got capabilities now. I knew there had to be a misspelling here somewhere. I'm glad that Ethan's not here. He would hang up on me right now. But basically, we have a purpose, we have identity, we have values, behaviors, environment. But for somebody who's really being more successful, so to speak, they definitely have much more. The capabilities and their values and identity are stronger. And so when you're looking in terms of making changes, you can see, okay, they have a lot of that stuff, good stuff going well. And my core thesis today for, okay, we want a 10x now. I believe this is what you have to do to increase your 10x outputs. You have to really expand your identity, your beliefs, values, and filters. And I actually do think the purpose is really important too. So you have to really greatly expand your purpose and your identity. Now, the constraints here may be a little fuzzier too, because again, this is all going on organically. So it is a logical level, but I firmly believe that to get the changes you want, these are the levels you want to consider in terms of 10xing. So essentially, the conclusion I guess I have for us today, guys, is that in order to change the 10x philosophy, change these filters: your focus, your system constraint, your identity and logical levels, and then essentially, I think what the key objective is for you to do is apply the same filters as your role model. Now, again, I may not have the same results as Charlie Munger, and I probably won't because of different factors, but I can get similar results as if he were in my shoes and start getting Charlie Munger results are better than Douglas Dowd results, I promise you. And so if I apply the same filters, I can start getting similar results. And I'm also going to pause it for you guys. The double bonus for next time we chat over coffee or your favorite beverage. What about Stoicism or cognitive behavioral theory, Buddhism even? These are also filters that we can apply to continue to improve our results. Also think about Uda Luke's and Charlie Munger's concept of mental models, and that's for next time or some other time you guys want to really geek out on this, give me a call and we can really go deep dive onto that aspect of things. This man, true nobility lies in being superior to your former self, and this is a great closing quote from Ernest Hemingway for food for thought. And just to wrap up, guys, just wanted to make that offer in terms of what I'm doing here and how I can help. How can we help you 10x? And that's the final question. If there's a way I can help you 10x in any way, shape, or form, please let me know.